Welcome to BPM Media at Fort Dunlop. My name's Paul Dale and I'm joined today by John Hemming, the Liberal Democrat MP for Birmingham Yardley and former Deputy Leader of Birmingham City Council, to discuss yet another worrying report about children's services in Birmingham. John, we know that an inquiry is going on into children's services in Birmingham after the government said that the services were inadequate. And I believe the inquiry is going to say there's systemic failure. What can be done after all the money, all the initiatives that have been put in over the years? What can be done to improve children's services?
I think that the problem in children's specialised services that we're talking about is that it's a complicated area. And over many years across England, and this is not a Birmingham problem, this is an English and Welsh problem, the system has basically not had proper management of the judgment issues, because the family courts basically go along with what the local authority says. And the whole system, because you can't get a second opinion, for instance, the experts are responsible to the local authority. They get their fees from the local authority in the main. If they fall out with the local authority, then they don't get their fees. So you have a court system that is dependent upon experts who are financially beholden to the local authority. What that means is it just rubber stamps whatever the local authority comes up with.
That sounds rather corrupt to me.
It is. But worse than that, what you then do is you bring in targets. And you bring in number targets, so many of this, so many of that, so many of the others, for complex judgmental issues. And performance targets for judgmental issues are really a bad idea. Now, they've scrapped the adoption targets last year, but didn't tell Ofsted, so Ofsted were still trying to encourage Birmingham to increase adoptions. And although it's worth looking at the figures, they've broken the system, but they've broken it across England, and you see the symptoms of that in Birmingham. I haven't seen the report. I have actually given evidence to the committee, but I haven't seen the report. But I would think that Birmingham is much like most of the English authorities, making very strange decisions at times with no accountability.
And you firmly believe, and you've got evidence to suggest this is the case, that in Birmingham there are children in care who should not be in care, and children in care who've been in care for a long, long time who should not be in care.
That's happened, yes, and we had a case in my constituency where they trashed the children's home to get out of it. Now, that's not the right route. The system should say, actually, well, this child should not be in care. But there is a difficulty, which is this. When you recognise as a practitioner that the child should not be in care and let a child go home, which is obviously some children need to be in care. Let's make it clear. It's a complex issue. It goes both ways. If you recognise that a child should go home, everyone then says, well, why did you take the child into care in the first instance? And we've got to get a little bit less punitive about people changing their minds, because they get so frightened of changing their minds that you have this cover-up process where they won't revert the original decision, the family court backs it up, the Court of Appeal backs it up, and the only hope is the European Court of Human Rights, which we should have some hope in the UK, really.
I suppose the other big problem in Birmingham is the awful absenteeism rate in children's services, 17-20%, and a huge vacancy rate among qualified social workers.
Well, you've got to ask, why have people left? It's because it's got really very stressful. It's a lot more stressful here. Because I deal with people who are refugees from this country. That is, they leave this country to get away from the family courts. And I deal with a few people in Sweden, mainly in Ireland. And the systems there are very different, and the tensions that exist on the ground aren't there. England has a very, very stressful and confrontational system, and it shouldn't be confrontational. Basically, everybody should want to do what's best for the kids, and most of the time, that should be agreement. It shouldn't require, we're going to take legal action now. And the sort of things that go on are dreadful. It's all sorts of bullying goes on.
I'm now joined by Susan Morris, an educational psychologist at Birmingham University. Susan, it seems to me that one of the key problems here is that something happens, say a terrible event like the Baby P tragedy in Haringey, and then this puts even more pressure on overworked social care departments across the country. More and more people report possible incidents. Police in Birmingham at the beginning of the year were reporting 800 incidents a month. It's almost unbelievable. What kind of impact is this having on young children who are perhaps dragged in to the care system unnecessarily?
Well, I think we might need clearer research on what percentage of young people are dragged into the childcare system unnecessarily. I think we have got difficulties in the social fabric of our society which can render many families ill-placed to cope with the demands of children and young people. But certainly there's very good evidence that while the group of children and young people who are looked after by the local authority are a very diverse group who come into care for very differing reasons, as a population, life outcomes remain poor despite over a decade of legislation and policy, trying to keep them out of the care system, to return them to their birth families, and to ensure that provision while they're in care gives them better opportunities to enjoy good mental health, good standard of care, good education.
And unfortunately, in Birmingham, it would seem that returning children to their families isn't happening very often, or if it is happening, it's not happening in a timely fashion. But I guess these are incredibly difficult decisions to make.
I think they're difficult decisions because there is a need to be very cautious in returning children to families where children have previously experienced trauma, abuse and neglect. Well, it's important to say that not all children by any means are received into care in the first place for reasons like that. But then I think we have an increasing investment in offering support for parents, training for parents in core skills, but not all parents are able to engage or complete training. And I'm aware of the difficulties that Birmingham Social Services face through absence, which, again adds to those difficulties, which are recursive. A bad problem gets worse in a vicious cycle.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about changes in society, which I think we're all familiar with. Presumably, more single parents who perhaps feel unable to cope. Do you see this getting worse over the next few years, or have we reached a plateau?
I think we have, again, just to be careful that some single parents are very good parents, but I would like to be optimistic, but I don't know that I do see grounds to believe that things will get better in terms of people having children as an informed life choice, having checked that they have the personal and social capital to do a good job for children.
Susan Morris, thank you very much.
Okay.